Welcome to the Veterans Psychedelic Discourse. We are a group that advocates for safe and responsible exploration of mental health treatments. And this is not a platform for the solicitation of illegal substances. Hey everyone. Brian and I initially had a couple of things lined up to discuss for today's show. However, we kind of just got into conversation, and I'm actually glad we did because it turned out really well. Um, Accidentally, I forgot to record the episode right away, and so we're coming in maybe about 3 to 4 minutes into Brian talking about getting a stellate ganglion block treatment from the VA. So enjoy the rest of the show.
For veterans, totally free, available, like cutting edge treatment, honestly, so what really has me excited is seeing that the VA is willing to get into this, and then also knowing that they offer ketamine therapy too through the PTSD clinic at the VA Long Beach as well. So the idea that these modalities are available right now at the VA, which typically you tend to see the slowest change in, like really gives me hope for the idea that when MDMA comes online, when psilocybin comes online, that the VA is going to start implementing changes in procedures to bring vets in and start using this stuff. So, I mean, because this stellate ganglion block in a privately sourced, it's a $2,000 procedure, you know?
Yeah. I find that interesting. In fact, if you could hook me into, I want to learn more about this too.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, they're talking to me about doing ganglion block for neck pain. My neck is degenerating, and
Yeah.
I don't know. This may have come out of those things. It's pretty common procedure to for cervical issues to do a nerve block.
Yeah, and so knowing that we've been doing this for a while and it's safe, because that was my big concern as I'm sitting there like with my head turned sideways and the lady like sticking a needle into my neck for what is actually just an elective surgery. I'm just like, what are you doing, man? But the idea that it's been safe for a while, that kind of like gives me a bit of confidence. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
it was a weird road to walk, but like I'm glad I did. And the truth is I'm gonna go back and do a second one. So yeah.
How widely known is this treatment among the VA? And I mean, can people get it everywhere, like in Kansas or Oklahoma?
Yeah, so I commented on that earlier. It's actually very exclusive at the VA. They will pay for it, they'll cover the cost for everything, but they only offer it in Long Beach, in California, and in Washington. So
DC.
it's very, yeah, DC. It's very limited. Oh, sorry, you guys were in Portland. My bad. Yeah, DC. Yeah. It's very limited distribution. I don't know what the VA will do to help cover travel costs, but from everything I know about the VA, they're responsible for that too. So if this is something you're interested in, this would be a conversation to have with potentially your psychiatrist or your general practitioner, just to talk to them about the fact that it exists and to see what it would take to put a request in. First, you do an intake where they talk to you about your anxiety and the different modalities you've tried to treat it, and then ultimately the plan would be to probably book a flight, get you out in California. They'd put you up in Long Beach and they do the treatment for you there. I had a pretty extensive conversation with the anesthesiologist about what it would be like to be out of state, and they made it sound like they were taking pretty much care of everything and that you'd just be on site the entire time. So might even be like a low-key small vacation.
Do you think many people know about this? Is there much demand?
No, well, it's not evidence based right now. There just hasn't been enough research into this, and so this isn't covered by insurance policies. But the thing is they're seeing so much efficacy with veterans. It's kind of like, well, when you are the insurer, why not provide the best treatment? So we're kind of in this weird situation where it seems like the cart has gone a little bit in front of the horse, and everyone else hasn't caught up with this yet. You know what I mean? So it'll be really interesting to see where we are in like in 4 or 5 years when like you're able to go talk to your general practitioner about your anxiety, and they're able to schedule you with somebody who can give you a stellate ganglion block in like 3 weeks, and like your anxiety's gone for 3 months, and this is just a normal procedure that people begin to experience.
Are they, did you say that they're doing the ketamine in the same way as the ganglion block? That is, yeah.
Yeah, they are doing ketamine as well. It is actually even a bit more exclusive than the stellate ganglion block. They have a lot of restrictions on getting into the ketamine program. From what I understand, if you're actually an active duty service member, it's easier to get ketamine treatment than it is to get it through the VA. So there are definitely some obstacles. One of the first major ones is you have to have tried a series of other modalities. I think it's at least 2 other medications. Sorry, before they're willing to put you into the ketamine program. And in addition to that, if you're using any alternative substances, even entheogens like marijuana or cannabis, or anything like that, and you pop on the piss test for that kind of stuff, they will not include you in the program. So the ketamine program is far more restrictive than the stellate ganglion program is, but they do offer it. And I'm sure it's going to get more expansive with time and with research.
Do they, if you are taking microdosing in mushrooms, is that one reason to be excluded?
I would doubt it, just because that would probably clear out of your system a lot quicker than, say, cannabis, which tends to have a residual effect of about 30 days. So I would doubt that. I think, honestly, I've noticed that, like, with the VA, there's almost like a bureaucratic filter where, like, you have to be willing to jump through the hoops in order to get what they have to offer. And the hoops are made to be kind of difficult to get through. So I feel like this is a really good example of that. They're like, oh, a lot of veterans smoke weed. Let's make it so you can't get the treatment if you're smoking weed. You know what I mean? It's kind of like one of those weird things. Like they've still got like this taboo view on it. Like, well, that's an illegal substance and that's an illegal substance. So if you're using both of them, we're just facilitating addicts. And it's like, oh my God, guys, can we just slow down here? Like,
Yeah, hopefully that'll be a little bit more widely available throughout the country. As far as the stellate ganglion block, which I know even our next guest, Lauren with Hippie and a Veteran Foundation, I was looking through their website, and she's an advocate for that as well. She's trying to get people to be aware of its benefits.
I think from my personal perspective, the real sticky wicket is cannabis. If we can get the feds to review the scheduling on cannabis, I really feel like that's like the thing that's holding back the floodgate. If we can have a fundamental review on how we view plants, you know what I mean, and their legality in society, I just feel like it's really going to change the way that we view a lot of these other substances that have been treated as taboo, especially like ibogaine. I would love to see ibogaine get off the scheduling list. That one just blows my mind.
Yeah, is is cannabis Schedule 1?
Yeah, no medical benefits. No medical benefits.
Right, worse than cocaine, right?
No.
And they're pushing back hard on rescheduling. They want to hold on to every bit of power they possibly can, and of course, all the funding that goes with it.
And that's exactly it right there, because it's not just about cannabis. It's about an entire economy that exists around making cannabis illegal. You have all the jails. Inside of every jail, you have people that are being paid money for being in jail. You have people that are making money for being in jail. Those people who are making money for keeping people in jail are in unions. They pay money to have lobbyists go to Washington and convince people to keep people in jail for smoking weed. So, like, there's this whole economy that's going on. You know what I mean? It's like
280 tax.
Yeah.
I mean, there's $1 billion made in 280 tax that they don't want to give up.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what how big of a hit it would take just the private prison industry just from cannabis alone, let alone like anything else.
At least 30% is my guess.
And that's the thing, like, it has to be substantial, because like Biden has come out twice and been like, we're letting everyone out of federal prison for cannabis convictions. And it's like, no one's in federal prison for cannabis, bro. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So wild.
No,
Brian?
Biden was one of the authors of the Patriot Act. So
I'm sorry?
Biden was one of the authors of the Patriot Act. He is a long time law enforcement hawk. I mean, he's been behind some of the worst bills in terms of throwing people in prison in this country.
Yeah.
Brian?
So like I said, I'm optimistic that if we can get cannabis rescheduled, it's going to really change how America views like a lot of what have been viewed as illegal substances. But
A big first step.
yeah.
Well,
There's-
HHS came out, I want to say 2 months ago, recommending, and the kept that under wraps. There was redacted stuff that came out, but basically they recommended it to go to Schedule 3.
Hmm.
And the IRS put out, I think last month, basically a note that says we don't have to take HHS's recommendations. We can do whatever we want, basically. I mean, I'm heavily paraphrasing, but that's basically what they said.
That was the
And so-
IRS.
The DEA, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay, gotcha.
They're the ones that scheduled it. Of course, in the first place, they were created around
Right.
that scheduling. So thank you,
Yeah.
Richard Nixon.
And that's the whole crazy thing is like we've got this whole scheduling thing, and then we came up with all these derivative laws in the 80s about not being able to have derivatives of these scheduled substances. And now that's literally what all the pharmaceuticals are doing right now, is creating derivatives that our government is going to create carve-outs for and allow them to be legal. And it's just like, what in the world, man? You can't even get the original substance anymore. You have to get like some weird corporate derivative in order to like play by the rules. Bizarre. That is actually something that came out of our conversation with Romig that I think is a good point. With that ketamine treatment, Johnson and Johnson has a ketamine treatment that they come out with and patented, and this is, I don't know if it's anecdotal, but I only heard it word of mouth, so I can't really verify the veracity. But from the perspective of this anesthesiologist, he was of the mindset that the Johnson and Johnson ketamine was responsible for more depressive symptoms than just regular ketamine. In other words, like suicidal ideation went up with Johnson and Johnson ketamine rather than like the traditional stuff that they'd use historically. So that makes me wonder too, is when these guys start producing these derivatives, are they making poison pills? You know? Are they doing things that are really going to like ultimately cause people to not trust the substances?
I mean, Blaine put a good thing in the chat. You know, THC's been legal Schedule 3 since '85. But that's the synthetic, isn't it? I mean, I don't remember the name, but I know people who've done it. They don't like it at all, you know, relative to doing
Marinol is the
Marinol.
substance.
Yep.
And that's a synthetic THC?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
I
Yeah.
haven't actually delved into much about like these synthetics and like positive or negative effects people chimed in about. Does anyone have any context as far as like if people have been actually in a worse off position after like consuming such substances?
Well, I can tell you one thing, guys. I worked for GE Capital and I was a commodities trader. And if you can't make money from it, they're not going to develop it. And that's why they want to make synthetics, because they can't make money from the plant. And the plant is what we want legalized. And that's why Marinol got legalized in 1985. And it's been legalized since 1985. THC has been legalized as a synthetic. And it sucks. I mean, I use THC for pain and have ingestibly for the last 15 years, and it works amazingly. I haven't used opiates for 15 years for my pain. Yeah. So yeah, as soon as they make it legalized, it will be a synthetic, and they'll try to keep the plant illegal as long as possible.
Well, and that's kind of what I was saying. The way that our laws are actually structured is that's actually what's going to happen. It would be far more easy for them to create a carve out for a new derivative that a drug or pharmaceutical company patented than it would be to go back and be like, hey, y'all, cocaine's legal. You know what I mean? So they're never going to go back and make any of the original substances legal. They're only going to allow companies to patent new ones that are slightly derivative of the original. That's like highly speculative on my part, but that, like, when I look at capitalism gone mad, that's kind of what I see. Yeah. You can't buy the nature. You got to buy the derivative, son. Like, wow.
Yeah, the whole opioid market is all about that. I mean, there's stuff that's now 10 times as potent as fentanyl, which of course is a derivative of, derivative of a derivative of, going all the way back to opiates as opposed to opioids. And the opiates are the actual opium derivative, codeine, morphine, heroin.
Yeah. Silver is in the chat. Part of the healing is the entire experience that these drugs give. I don't understand how they expect the same effects from their versions of them. So that makes me think. My mind goes to what is it? Maybe you guys might know something on this. I feel like I heard of something like a psilocybin or was it DMT? So it's what something, some type of some version of psilocybin or DMT that it takes this
DMTX.
experience out of it, where you don't trip.
Oh,
And it's supposed to give you a similar amount of healing. And I think you and I, Brian, have spoke about this just privately a little bit, talking about like how much of kind of like earning the healing, kind of, you like the trip, so to speak, would
the
make you
journey
experience.
matters. Yeah, the journey matters. Yeah, this actually comes, I read a research paper last semester, and they were talking about how they had localized two specific genes that seem to have the most productive effect from psychedelics. And that classic psychedelics like lysergic acid and LSD-25 and psilocybin had the highest effect. It was actually like 1,000 times more powerful than traditional SSRIs. But the two places they localized the effect was the 5-HT2A serotonin gene, and what it would do is it would kind of open it and allow for a better uptake of serotonin. But then the other thing that would happen, and this is what they were really trying to key in on, is there's a gene called the TRKB gene. And if you're able to open this up, which they do with lysergic and psilocybin, it actually has an antidepressant effect. And this is what they're trying to key in on, is how we can provide people with the antidepressant effect of psychedelics without giving them the psychedelic trip. And so that's kind of what the research paper was all about, was like, how do we give them the effect without the trip? And it's like, this is the whole Ulyssean mysteries. Like, you have to die before you die. You know what I mean? Like, you can't not die before you die. Like, you have to die before you die.
Yeah, it's the whole, do you have a mystical experience, for lack of a better word, or do you just take this drug and go on about your business? I mean, for some people, it's actually, I think, an advantage if it can have efficacy in terms of depression or any of the number of things that we know that psychedelics can do, but are deathly afraid of taking that journey, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely petrified. And if you move that out of the way, it could help any number of people. Personally, I think the journey itself has an awful lot to do with the healing. But I also think that that's a lot psychological, mental, and emotional, as opposed to the physical aspects.
So my mind.
So
what was that last part?
I said that's just me thinking out loud.
Oh, my mind goes to like maybe some of the epiphanies that someone might have on like a larger dose trip, and to kind of take some of these things away. I feel like it would be, I see it being somewhat of a bad thing, though. If someone's petrified and is in the worst, like crippling stages of their depression, I mean, I guess, I don't know, anything and anything that could help, I would be willing to have this person try. But I feel like there's a real disservice to excluding that effect.
Because ironically, I feel like this is like completely on par with the ego. You know what I mean? Like, at the core, when I look at what's happening with a psychedelic trip, it's surrender. Like, I'm going to go take a low-grade toxin that's going to make my body not work properly. I'm going to feel weird things and see weird things. I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I'm doing all of this voluntarily. I surrender. Like, okay, let's do this, you know? But like, not having that process of surrender, like, that's what allows the ego to remain intact. You have to surrender. You have to like be helpless and give up and just kind of like sit in it. That's, I mean, my opinion, just from my own experiences, but like, I just feel like they're taking out the very thing that allows you to realize like you can risk it all and you're going to make it. You're strong enough.
You get to that point where the only way out is through.
Yeah. The obstacle is the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, there are people who are, you know, in psychotic state, or they're, you know, I mean, we hear all the warnings about who not to take, shouldn't take psychedelics. And like bipolar folks, for instance, who are suffering from bipolar disorder. Although you speak to someone with bipolar disorder and they say psychedelics have helped me more than any other thing that I've been able to use. So, you know, we're at that. Yeah, they always know better than we do, don't they?
Yeah, but yeah, what I was gonna say, and to go along with the like the obstacle is the way. I mean, that's a big part of a big trip. That's, I feel for myself, is pretty common, but also just kind of stripping away parts of like who you are and have a little bit better understanding, and then how you connect in that way with other people. I feel like to kind of pull that, to exclude that, I mean, that I feel like that's totally integral to the part of the psychedelic experience. And if you're pulling out like the epiphany of the unity and connection with other people and living things in life and stuff, like, what's the goal here? What are we doing? Just trying to make ourselves, just try to pull ourselves out of a depression.
I
don't
think the
know.
people that are proposing this, you know, no emotional release, I don't think they know anything about psychedelics. I doubt if they've even tried it, you know, especially some of the politicians that are making laws about this.
Sure, I forget where I heard it. Am I? But I someone said like for someone allowed to become president, they have to have at least like 8 trips of DMT.
Yeah, Graham Hancock on the Joe Rogan show was saying you need to do like use psychedelics like 10 times in order to be president. Yeah.
I'd say
That's
MDMA also.
yeah.
Sure. Oh, sure, sure,
And that's
sure.
well, and that's what's so fascinating. As we begin to learn more about these substances, we not only learn about their individual utility, we learned about their combined utility, like the efficacy of MDMA used with psilocybin, or the efficacy of LSD used with DMT. Like, I mean, just to make it as simple as possible, lysergic acid opens up your serotonin receptors in a way that like you can't imagine. And so when you do that, it augments how you experience serotonin. But then in addition to that, when you use DMT, well, DMT is a serotonin agonist. So all your receptors are open, and now you're using a substance that's going to flood your body with serotonin. It's like, wow, man, wait and see what happens. You want to talk about psychological relief? Like, that's pretty incredible.
Light the afterburners.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole idea that like these substances have value, but like the additional value by combining them, that's what I'm most interested in seeing, is like the complexity and what they're able to accomplish when they're used like in a compound way.
I'm super interested in that as well. I mean, there's a lot of people that might take that and think, maybe take it a little bit too far. I think back to like a lot of the interactions I've had with that are more on the recreational side, and people just going off the deep end. Though getting familiar and knowing what you're using and having a relationship to it, and knowing what to combine or and how to use it. I mean, I feel like there's been some positive outcome from doing so, at least in my experience. I mean, you and I, Brian, yeah, that's kind of like the foundation of how we even got here in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, just as like a small outline, we were using lysergic as kind of a baseline. We'd, use it early in the morning. We'd meditate and we'd spend time kind of reflectively kind of engaging in meditation. And then we would use DMT as an agonist in order to like engage in, I would say, either deeper meditation or questioning. It was either one of those two things. But we found that if we asked questions to things we didn't know, we would get genuine answers out of the experiences. So I don't know, man, just combining these substances, just like using them in tandem and finding like the most incredible results. Pretty bizarre. My point behind this is just two people's subjective experiences. What'll be interesting is what happens when we get a trial of 1,000 people and we get a bit more of an objective perspective on what's really happening and how it affects people.
Brian, did you mean DMT or 5-MeO DMT?
Just the
And then
regular
DMT.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't experienced 5-MeO before.
We were introduced to it at the or just so many people were talking to us at the symposium back in 2022 about it, and like some of the phrasing that was involved was like, I didn't know if I wanted to shit myself or vomit. I was just kind of like, I'm not sure that's the trip I'm looking for, man.
The obstacle is the path.
Talk about the porcelain god.
Yeah. So yeah, just the normal stuff, but yeah, I think, and even more so than the substance, is just paying attention to the effect that it has in the body internally. There's enough research out there, but we're starting to get an idea of what's actually happening internally. and it's pretty incredible, especially like the remedial effects of it. Like I made the comment earlier that these classic psychedelics like lysergic and psilocybin have like 1,000 times the effect that traditional SSRIs do on antidepressant effect. And like we're humans, so we're like 1,000 times, whatever. That's great. But like you have to understand, like if you had like a field that you were farming and you developed the technology that took that 1 acre field and turned it into 1,000 acres of like farmed agricultural field, that's like going from the Stone Age to like modern agrarian culture. That is like such a massive step in development. It's not even funny. So the idea that we're like struggling with depression and anxiety to the degree that we are right now, and the fact that we have this potential treatment that offers such an incredibly advanced outcome compared to like the most traditional stuff like SSRIs, which don't even work the way we think they work. I think SSRIs are probably like the greatest indication of the efficacy of the placebo effect. Just like have a doctor give you a pill and tell you it'll work and see what'll happen. Like, welcome to SSRIs, folks. So it'll be interesting to see like what happens when we actually start putting real research behind this, hooking people up to like EEG machines and like really taking a look at what's happening internally as they're experiencing these substances.
Yeah, the avenues for research are incredible. And
I'm sorry.
I said the avenues for research are incredible. The things that the very little microdosing research, right? And they're looking at. I mean, part of it is, and now we get back to. Do you have a journey? Do you have a trip? Do you have hallucinations, auditory, physical, visual, whatever? Or do you have just the effects without those? And how do you do a double-blind test if you're using the actual hallucinogenics? How do you do that? There is no placebo that you can give someone. You're tripping or you're not. Right?
Yeah.
Right. I think I read something recently that was about one of those studies, and they're using, I don't recall if it was like 1/4 of a gram or something like that, as far as like psilocybin, and then the placebo would be, I believe it was 4 times the amount by weight, but it was niacin. That's what they were using for that particular study.
I'm feeling really hot and red right now. What's going on, guys?
So I wonder if the part of the sample group is of people that haven't done it before, so they don't know what they're expecting.
I would expect that that's the case, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
They'd have to weed out everyone that's done it before.
Just to give you guys an update, so they're actually currently doing research on that SGB block that I was talking about. And so when you go in, they ask you on a scale of 1 to 10 how much anxiety you experience normally. After they give you the shot, they ask you how much anxiety you're experiencing on a scale of 1 through 10 after the shot. And then the following day, they ask you the same question again. And then a week later, they ask you the same question again. The whole point is the only data that they're actually pulling from veterans is a single number between 1 through 10. That's it. That's all the data that they're accumulating.
Brian, will the VA do the ketamine just for depression, or is it only anxiety? Do you happen to know?
I don't know, but that would be a really good question. I would wager that kind of question would be what would get your psychiatrist or your general care provider like asking the right kind of questions to get you the treatment that you need. So the original point that I was making early on was that a lot of these services are only available in Long Beach in California. So there need to be some kind of travel that would take place if you were going to engage in treatment through their program. But as far as what it works to effectively treat, I believe ketamine is used for depressive symptoms. You know what I mean? I don't think it's limited to anxiety. I don't know if anybody else here could speak to that a little bit more. I've actually personally never done ketamine, so I'm only commenting having spoken to people that provide the treatment, but never actually having received it. So,
and I see it becoming a lot more widely available throughout the country within maybe this year, because take this with a grain of salt, but speaking to some previous guests that we've had that are working on the MDMA psilocybin study in the Portland VA, one of the facilitators in that study I spoke to and said that Congress is pushing the FDA to approve these so that it could be more widely used throughout the VA. And hopefully when that rolls out, we get a lot more studies, a lot more data on its efficacy, and then we'll be able to see it just hopefully we'll see rescheduling soon after, or at least we'll have the data for it to support it. So but again, things change, and we could get excited, but we just got to keep our heads down, and hopefully just the work continues, which I have no doubt that we're going to see something positive come out of. Go ahead, Brian.
Real quickly, I was listening to the news a few days ago, and I got a update on psychedelics from the most unexpected of sources. They were talking about the Ukraine war. I guess Ukraine is treating their veterans right now who are experiencing traumatic brain injury and just general trauma from war with ibogaine. This is a treatment that they're effectively using in Ukraine right now. So it will be very interesting to see what data comes out of this. You know what I mean? If they're using this like in the middle of a war, it's going to be very hard to deny that it has some kind of efficacy afterwards. So like I said early on, getting ibogaine unscheduled, that would be an incredible. I mean, like I just think about how much addiction exists in this world. Imagine not having to go to like a 30-day recovery facility and just instead getting to spend like 4 hours in somebody's office experiencing ibogaine, reflecting on your life and placing your trauma in the appropriate places so you can psychologically integrate them and not need to use substances to numb yourself from reality. Wow, trip.
You bring up an interesting point. I was just thinking about this and how the VA has been integral in terms of moving forward the use of psychedelics. And ketamine isn't a psychedelic. Ibogaine, there's, I put it in it's certainly an entheogen. But I mean, going back to this, the whole 30-day thing came out of the VA in terms of the amount of time you could be out of active service in order to get, I mean, all this stuff is wrapped into schedules that paper pushers put together. It has nothing to do with the actual, what is the greatest efficacy, what's the best amount of time to get someone from a lifetime of addiction into being away from it. 30 days is just, it really is an arbitrary number based on the, based on the money. Really, it all revolves around the money. But another thing I was going to say is like ketamine, for instance, was used in Nam as an anesthetic that wouldn't put people under in terms of depressing their breathing capabilities, paralyzing the diaphragm. And they found that people who had been given ketamine injections for injuries in the field were much, much more, they were quicker to come back to, they healed quicker. They didn't have the emotional and mental effects that happen when you're all those things that they are now using ketamine for were a side effect of what they were using for in the field. So ibogaine in Ukraine is another great example of that. It'll be interesting to see.
From what I understand, ibogaine got scheduled because it got wrapped up in a drug raid with other substances, and it was there, and it was like, well, welcome to the party. So, from what I understand, the whole scheduling of ibogaine was pretty dubious to begin with, just kind of like in the wrong place at the wrong time. So,
yeah, but that's like saying like as if any of the rest of it was done because of any type of data or like research. It's just a big blanket to
you were commenting on the 30-day program thing too, and this is something I've only recently become aware of, but I think there's actually a very insidious aspect of it. What happens is you'll have people that are addicts that will go into recovery for 30 days, less so with alcohol, but it's still a potential with alcohol, but more so with other substances. They get their bodies clean, they get their tolerance reduced, and then they get let go on the street with no real plan to integrate themselves back into society. They go find a source for more substance. They use the amount of substance they were using when they went into recovery, and that is an OD now that they're 30 days clean, and that this happens over and over and over again. So it's almost like they're getting people healthy enough to kill themselves. Like really weird way to look at it. And even with alcohol, it's the same thing, man. You get out of a rehab and you all go on a bender or something, man. Like, I mean, yeah, geez, man. Grab yourself a bottle of Everclear, man. You ain't gonna make it too long.
So it's like a slingshot effect going on.
It's almost like a setup, you know what I mean? Like for the fragile minded, for the eggshells, it's like you're setting them up to get crushed. It's like, what the hell, bro? And this is average best treatment.
Well, you're looking at AA is still looked at as one of the most effective, and yet it's less than 30% effective. That's a failure rate that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, whenever someone brings up AA, the first thing my mind goes to is that the original founder wanted the inclusion of like a psychedelic experience, but like the other people involved were like, no, 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 it's a substance. We can't have people falling back into this ring. And but you know, not there these, it's not like it's the exact, psilocybin is not like alcohol. You know, lysergic acid is diethylamide is not like alcohol. It's a totally different experience, and this is the danger of just having a blanket stigma for just a group of things, and just pushing the fear of it. And it's like we're not making progress with that methodology. We have to, you know, bother to look and just to dig into these things, because there's tools here. We just have to know how to use them, but we're too afraid to pick them up. And it's just yeah.
The Bill Wilson story is just so incredible too, because number one, it's not only the fact that like you could just exchange spiritual experience for psychedelic experience. That's what he's really saying. But it's number two, how cutting edge the treatment he was actually getting. Like we hear Bill Wilson and AA and we're like, oh, whatever. But it's like, like contextually, you have to understand this guy is like in correspondence with Jung. Jung is telling him like, hey, there's nothing I can do to Carl Jung, the psychologist, is talking to Bill Wilson and telling him there's nothing I can do to help you, but there is this incredible new treatment that's available in Canada. Bill Wilson takes off to Canada to go get this treatment with a doctor, Dr. Cohen. I can't remember his name, literally leaves the country to go to another country to get a cutting edge treatment using psychedelics in order to treat his addiction, comes back completely recovered, turns around, looks at the church and is like, oh my God, we need to share this with everyone. And then willingly edits the reality of what helped him. And it's like, I don't know, like, I don't see that as helpful, guys. That's actually not very helpful, in my opinion. Like, hey, I changed. Let me lie to you about how it happened, you know? And all you have to do is walk into an AA meeting and let them know that you're interested in psychedelics for recovery, and they'll boot you out in a heartbeat, man. Yeah, like, fuck, dude. It's literally their foundation. It's their founder's story. Like,
we're going to now start passing around the donation basket.
I know, gosh, man. Yeah.
Have a donut and a cigarette.
Yeah. And coffee, donut, cigarette.
Yeah,
You're good.
Cup of coffee. Yeah. And not trying to hate on AA, man. They do good work, but it's just like the lack of transparency about the original roots and like what actually worked for Bill Wilson and like how cutting edge what he was doing was just really blows my mind.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the block, and that is, I mean, we've all done benzos for anxiety. And I was wondering what the experience relative to the anxiety relief was with the block versus benzos, and they don't have to be anything alike. I'm just curious.
So I used to have a prescription for benzos that I didn't care for it. I hated it because what would happen is when you take them, it would numb you. It would just kind of numb you to what was going on internally. You're still dealing with everything, but like you're just numb now. You know, so the difference that I would say is I feel like benzos tend to assist the paralysis, whereas the stellate ganglion block actually like kind of overcame the paralysis. My big takeaway is this, is that anxiety tends to have very limited responses. We either freeze, we run, we fight, or we fawn, or just basic things. What I started realizing with myself, and maybe this is true for a lot of us, is that when I was experiencing anxiety, paralysis was actually my natural state. It was to do nothing, to freeze. And I would wait until the anxiety got so bad that I had to make the decision to fight or to run. You know what I mean? And so by realizing that my baseline was anxiety, well, actually, that's what the stellate ganglion did. It helped me realize that my baseline for anxiety was paralysis. So now when I find myself feeling anxious and not doing something, I'm able to like be more aware and better assess and take action as a result of it. Whereas I didn't get any of that from the Klonopin or from the benzos. You know what I mean? That shit would just like shut you down and make you sleepy for a day. So I look at that as more like masking a symptom. And this one is more of like, I don't know. I want to say maneuvering around, but like at the end of the day, my relationship with it completely changed. You know what I mean? Like when I find myself not doing the things that I need to do that are giving me anxiety, I'm like, oh, now I know what I need to do. And for years, I had no idea that I was fucking paralyzed. I just thought I was like, you know, that this was normal, you know? So I'm sorry, that might be a little bit convoluted, but yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's a real good description. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can I ask a question? How many people heard about the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act? There's
I'm familiar. Is something going on, or
no light bulbs went off or any. Okay,
no, it's the annual,
right.
basically it's the defense budget.
Yeah.
Okay, in December it was passed, and on page one, it's not. Don't print the whole thing. It's 900 pages, but I think on page 170, 172, section 723. Remember that 723. I'm going to read you the title: Program of the Department of Defense to study treatment of certain conditions using certain psychedelic substances. The Department of Defense has this written in there, and it passed. Now, I will read you the conditions on the next page, 2 pages. The term covered conditions means any of the following: post-traumatic stress, A, and B, traumatic brain injury. Those are the 2 conditions. The next section is the term covered psychedelic substances means any of the following: A, 3,4-methoxy or methylene dioxymethamphetamine, MDMA, B, psilocybin, C, ibogaine, D, 5-methoxy-NN dimethyltryptamine, commonly known as 5-MeO-DMT or the toad, and then E, qualified plant-based alternative therapy. So that includes everything else that will fit into that category. So, surprise.
They're leaving LSD out specifically.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Charles Manson. So yeah, check it out. Just put NDAA 2023 or 2024. It's for 2024, and on that it's section 723. I mean, this is like sort of never happened before. Who would have ever believed that? 50 years ago?
You talking about this just like kicked off a light bulb in my head. It's not going to start in the civilian sector. It's going to start in the military. People in the military are going to start doing ibogaine. They're going to start getting treatment for their TBI while they're still in. And the reason they're going to do it is because there's no liability. You can't sue the federal fucking government when you're an employee of the government. There's no liability whatsoever. They have the largest sample available of people that are likely to experience trauma, and they can study them for fucking free. This is why it's easier to get ketamine if you're active than if you're a veteran. Wow, thank you. I never thought about that. That's why.
Yeah, that bolsters my enthusiasm for like from what's the work going on at the Portland VA, and just how they were saying that we're going to start seeing it a little bit more widespread throughout the country, as far as at least bare minimum MDMA and psilocybin through the VAs for PTSD treatment.
Think about like the psychological wagon load that America is going to have to deal with when they realize that their war fighters are engaging in psychedelic treatments in order to be better war fighters. That's a lot to deal with.
Each room's become a better killer. Oh, man. That's so flipped. It's like, what was the section under the NDAA?
723.
723. That's what I thought. But okay, thanks.
Also, in evaluating this, they're going to do the studies, and let's see, looking at the number of active duty. This is for active duty who participated in the clinical trials described in the subsection covered conditions, and then and whether members return to full duty. You know, I think that's a big question. How many? And I think it was Crenshaw. His fingerprints are on it from Texas, because you're familiar with Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, and Heroic Hearts. The vets guys go to Mexico for the ibogaine and 5-MeO. That's their protocol, pretty much.
Ayahuasca.
So,
yeah.
What's that?
Ayahuasca.
Well, no, that I'm talking about the toad.
Okay.
Heroic Hearts has been going down to the Amazon for primarily ayahuasca. However, in November, they had their first, in Bend, they had their first legal U.S. ceremony. I don't know if you guys read about that.
Of course, we've been trying to get in contact with them to have him back on.
Okay.
As a guest.
Okay. I might be able to put the word in.
Yeah, that would be great.
That'd be great.
Any help?
Okay.
Our whole purpose for this platform is just trying to connect people. You know what I mean? Like if we get them on here and get other vets involved, absolutely.
Okay, I'll send a text.
Yeah.
And they have your information already?
I've sent Jesse Gould an email, and then we've had, I believe he might have been on a couple years ago with different set of hosts, but then we've
Yes, he
also
was.
had Jared Reinhardt twice, and he's like their head coach / facilitator. So we have some people there, but they might be busy right now. They just haven't gotten back to us since recently.
They have both been guests on this, and it was a couple years ago. Yeah.
And Alex and I are actually both ambassadors through Heroic Heart. So if it's that agency, like if you just give them our names, they should have our contact info.
Okay, so you know Jenny then. Jenny's
The
coordinator.
ambassador lady,
Yeah.
coordinator.
Right. Okay, will do. The more messages she gets about it, the more she'll get excited, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
I love being the squeaky wheel.
Blaine, I wanted to ask you about, you had stepped away and we were talking about LSD and DMT in combination. And I'm wondering if you got any insight about that.
Well, I would have to say that mixing these molecules is a very different little aspects, but I've done quite a different experimenting on mixing DMT with LSD, and I would say that if anybody has done DMT when they've done the rocket launch by itself, when you mix DMT with these other molecules, I have seen DMT, it slows down quite a bit. That's what makes it kind of very interesting. It doesn't go as fast, and so it kind of gives it that kind of slowing it down, kind of gives it a really different texture. I don't know if that is something that anybody else has experienced, if that's what you were looking for, John, or not, but that's just something I've experienced.
I was just, I haven't experienced it and was just wondering, what's it like? So, yeah. There's what the hippie flip is psilocybin and MDMA.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common. What's the other one?
Candy flip.
Candy flip.
There's all types of fun new
Oh,
names
yeah,
for these.
yeah.
There's the Jedi flip. There's all this stuff.
Well,
Skateboard moves. They're all these skateboard moves.
I did the God flip in 2019, and that one was what I would say mind blowing. And I would say it's going to be on my list of things I'll do again someday. But you start off with LSD, about 45 minutes later, you do psilocybin, 45 minutes later, you do MDMA, and 45 minutes later, you do DMT. So when I did the DMT, it was literally about the slowest DMT experience I've ever had. And that's why it was so bizarre, because I wasn't ever aware of DMT having that kind of slowness. I mean, because DMT, if you've ever experienced DMT by itself, it's literally, once you take it, you're just literally out in the middle of nowhere in the universe. And
Can I ask, when you do DMT, are you doing this in like a environment where your eyes are closed, or are you doing this where you're like engaging with the world around you?
In the particular moment with the God flip, I was doing it with my eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
But I have done it. I've never done it out in nature, just for the simple fact that I always fall down. So I know this, so that I'm, I don't want to fall down and hurt myself. So I am either laying down when I do it, or very close to an apparatus that's going to be comfortable to fall down to. So yeah, I generally do DMT with with the kind of a blindfold apparatus, just for the simple fact that it is a short experience, so I'm not really kind of looking for that open eye kind of experience, if that's what you're asking, Brian.
Yeah, it's you're using the term slow down, and like I've experienced both of those, like individually, but then also like in combination. And what I've noticed is it's like when I have my eyes open, I'm like in an observer role when I'm using the substance. But when I have my eyes closed, and particularly if I'm using in combination with an additional substance like lysergic, um, it's almost like by closing my eyes and not engaging with the physical world, it allows me to become more interactive with whatever the experience is. You know what I mean?
Yes. When you say lysergic, what do you mean by lysergic?
Like just
Lysergic
traditional
acid
LSD.
diethylamide.
Yeah,
LSD. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are you taking a full dose of LSD or are you taking
Normally like quarter to a half. Um, yeah, so we kind of cooked up our own blend to reduce the efficacy of it, to kind of take some of the edge off. Um, but really, it was just a primer to kind of get the body ready from the research that we were doing. It was a primer to get like our 5-HT2A receptors kind of primed for the agonist that we were going to put on top of it. So like we were looking at it from like a very chemistry oriented perspective.
yeah, that's why
From,
dose.
I'm sorry.
That's why I was asking the dose of the LSD. So when you're saying, so like, 60 mics or 75 micrograms, is that kind of what you're looking at?
Yeah, we were not that accurate. Basically, you take a full vial, you split it between two vials, you put 151 in to fill up the rest of it, and you put it all on paper, like, and call that
Okay.
science. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm assuming by doing that, I'm getting about half the efficacy from a single dose that I would if I had not diluted it. So, that's kind of how I'd look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, but
And,
just I mean,
and
from my perspective, just its role as a primer for a much more intense substance like DMT. Wow, man, the two working hand in hand together. I just like knowing what I know about what's happening inside the body. It's just an incredible combination. So I've never tried the MDMA psilocybin combination, but I wonder about the efficacy for treatment for anxiety for that. That sounds fascinating.
Right. Well, the guys at the, it sounds like people are able to engage and dig deep into their traumatic experiences and spend time there without actually having the discomfort of doing so. So it's like, as far as therapy is concerned, I have nothing but high hopes for what's going to come out of those things. But Blaine, when you were talking about the whole God flip thing with LSD 45 minutes, psilocybin 45 minutes, MDMA, are these like microdoses or are these full doses?
um, when I did it, the LSD was 150 mics. The MDMA was 125. The psilocybin was 3.5 grams, and the DMT was 60 milligrams. So they were all full doses.
Yeah.
And then okay, and then you have DMT at the very end, but obviously you're not having like a MAO inhibitor. So you're laying down for like the 10-15 minutes and then you're coming out and you're still on the LSD, psilocybin, and MDMA. And you just have like the DMT experience to kind of, I mean, what I'm curious on like what it did for you. As far, were you like trying to work through something specifically, or was this like an experimental type of thing?
It was experimental, along with I had a friend of mine who came over to my house about 4 days before. He knew I was going to do an experiment. I was going to I was going to have an experience on the 25th. And he said, "So what medicines are you going to use?" And he's a shaman. And I just kind of said, "I was thinking about doing a candy flip." And he says, "Have you ever done a God flip?" And I kind of just candidly looked at him and said, "Yeah, you're making up something." And he goes, "No, it's really something." And after he left, I actually Googled it because I still thought he was making it up. And it's really something you could, of course, if Google says it's something, it's real, jokingly. But it is something I Googled, and it really was something on Google. So I thought, okay, maybe Hawkeye is not just giving me shit here. And I had the four medicines, so I thought about it, and I was like, should I, you know, should I do this? And so then I thought about it, and I said, okay. And so I put the four together, and knowing that by the time I got to the DMT, I would be pretty not functional. So I loaded the DMT into my PAX vaporizer ahead of time, and I actually did all the medicines. and set timers, because I knew that by the time I was going, I would, lose track of time. And yeah, it was mind-blowing, spectacular. Did I learn something from it? Was it therapeutic? I think it was beneficial, therapeutic, and I think in an experimental way, it was in my who I am as a person and where I was at, because this is about 45 years into my using of psychedelics. It was beneficial in my pain and my suffering, and it was just something that I thought was, let's try this. Do I recommend it to other people? Not necessarily. Would I recommend it to anybody who hasn't used psychedelics for more than a couple of years? No, I would definitely not. This is not something that I would recommend to anybody who hasn't used psychedelics for a number of years. And I would put it closer to the recreational use than I would a therapeutic use, if you ask me.
This is fascinating. I'm looking at these substances and I'm considering what's happening, and the LSD and the psilocybin, they actually have the same classic effects on, like I talked about earlier, the serotonin receptors, and also like the antidepressant effects of the TRKB gene. But then also in addition to that, so basically you're taking like these two things that are going to augment how your body receives serotonin, and they do it each in their own way. And then on top of that, you just like splash serotonin agonist, serotonin agonist, serotonin agonist. Like, that's so crazy, because MDMA and DMT are both agonists for serotonin. They like flood your body with it. It's just such a weird, like I see this, I see why it would work and why this would be like an absolutely mind-blowing experience. Like you're priming yourself to feel something that you probably have never felt before.
Right. I agree. I could see there being, going into this and like meditating and being prepared to like dig deep into, I don't know, like a trauma or like an issue. I feel like this might be really an interesting experience to try to get through something like that, especially with the support of the MDMA kind of cutting away at that, like that fear, and the discomfort of it. Though, I mean, like Blaine's saying, like, I don't know, Heroic Hearts, just that this is their new thing. Is just no, I don't want to say that, but yeah, I would be very reluctant to have someone that's new to the whole psychedelic experience to have them start on their trauma with this type of combo.
Did you only use the DMT once, or did you do like a progressive scaling with it?
In this particular experience, I had it loaded into the PAX vaporizer, a PAX 3 vaporizer, and I puffed on it 3 large puffs and set it on the bed, and that's all that I recall using it.
Gotcha.
When you say it slowed the combination, sort of slow the DMT down, are you talking about the effects for the same amount of duration were slowed down, or the duration was lengthened, or both?
If you've done DMT, when you fall backwards on DMT, before you actually hit the surface, you're gone. If you've done DMT. And in this instance, when I did it, I hit the bed, and I don't have a water bed, and it reverberated 3 times like it was a water bed. And when John just asked about and because of the other substances, I could never tell you how long the DMT, because before, whenever I've ever done DMT, I can give you kind of an estimate of how long the experience is, because it's such a short experience. But because of the other substances on board, I could never tell you how long that experience was.
Makes sense.
I've heard that using Syrian rue or harmine before the DMT, I don't know if you make a tea or what, will prolong the DMT experience quite a bit. I don't know if you want to add that to it. I'm not suggesting it. Just making a point.
Guy, what you're talking about is when you're looking at ayahuasca, that's what ayahuasca is. I have smoked Harmony before smoking DMT, and it will lengthen the DMT experience. And when you ingest Harmony, that's usually what the vomiting comes from when people take ayahuasca. It's not the DMT. But if you ingest DMT by itself, it doesn't give you experience.
So those are MAOIs.
Yes, that's the chemistry.
An MAOI inhibitor.
Yes,
Yes.
right.
That's the Harmony.
That's interesting. You're talking about the duration. We talked about Graham Hancock earlier. Last time I listened to him, he was talking about Imperial College in London, and they're developing what's referred to as DMTX. And it's supposed to provide about an hour-long experience in the DMT realm. So that'd be fascinating if that ever makes its mainstream. Like, I just couldn't imagine having 60 minutes in that environment.
Aren't there, I swear I read about some folks doing intravenous drips with DMT.
That is what the DMTX is. It's an intravenous drip that they keep going for about an hour.
I can tell you right now, there's a doctor in Dallas, Texas, who's doing ketamine DMT, IVs.
Rick Strassman's research was using an IV drip with DMT.
Yep. It's funny, he reflects on that though, and the reason he does it is because that basically it's like, well, that's what they did before, and he didn't want to like have people smoking DMT in the research environment. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how we find ourselves with these modalities. Like, yeah.
Can I add something? This is like another official bill thing. I live in Washington, and I think most of you guys are close to Portland, so we're not that far away. But there's a bill that was read on the floor of this month on the 8th, and the number of it is 5977. It's only 7 pages. And again, just because it hits the floor, I mean, it can get changed all around by the time it gets voted on. And this is sort of an addition, but I'm going to read this part. It says, it is not a violation of this chapter or local law for a nonprofit organization, this relates to psilocybin, to purchase, receive, possess, cultivate, deliver, or dispose of psilocybin or psilocybin mushrooms. And this is like a psilocybin therapy session, or for a participant to possess or consume psilocybin in accordance with this section. And then further down here, it says the nonprofit organization under this subsection must have an explicit goal of promoting wellness for and assisting military veterans or first responders. Then it lists all the first responders, firefighters. And then on page 5, it says, the nonprofit organizations providing psilocybin services authorized under this sections are prohibited from billing or charging participants for the services. So, I mean, this is like, I don't know if it's going to pass in this form. It's just, it's only been a few weeks that this has hit the thing. But thinking about this for a few days, do we know any nonprofit organizations that are looking out for veterans, like American Legion, Veterans of Foreign War, AMVETS? Are they going to
also? Sorry about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say also, I know some people might not be a fan of it, but there's also a gigantic network of nonprofits that are churches. You know what I mean? Like the potential that you could literally have like a minister become a facilitator because he meets the requirements for MAPS because he's got a master's in theology. You know what I mean? Like actually just turning like this dying existing network of churches that are disappearing across America into something that actually serves the community.
So there's a lot of potential here. I don't know where it's going to go, but again, that's 5977. So, and I've gone, a friend of mine and I are talking about going to the American Legion and explaining what psilocybin is. And there's some curiosity, but it's kind of like, oh gosh, here's this guy again. I don't know.
Guys, that's a House bill, right? House bill
Yes. Oh no, it's a
5977. Yeah. Who
Senate bill.
sponsored it? Do you know?
Jesse Solomon, who's up near north of Seattle.
Oh, this is a state bill?
Yeah, for
Okay,
Washington.
gotcha. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't explain that.
No, that makes total sense. The potential for this nationally, I mean, that would be incredible if this were something that would be adopted widespread.
Well, it's got to start somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
And just to throw something out, John Hawk was involved with the cultivation class, right? With the professor.
Yeah.
Okay, I went to the last meeting they had, which was 2 or 3 days before he passed away. But that was an incredible meetup, and I would encourage you to start it up again. That was just really good. And Magic Maiko, I think, was there speaking. Duma.
Yeah. Yep.
So that was really, really good.
I want to do it. It's a question of how much energy and time I've got. So, yeah. It was really well received, and it was really interesting, the discussions. Most fun I've had on Zoom ever.
I appreciate all you guys coming and engaging today. This is a lot longer of an event than I was expecting. I thought it was just going to be a short, sweet thing, but we've gotten to some pretty good conversation. None of it of which was part of my notes that I was trying to put together to try to like have something to say. So I definitely appreciate you guys making this happen. Before I wrap it up, does anyone have anything else to include?
I do. It's just a minor thing. You were talking about combining the different substances. And one thing that really impressed me was, there was this adult, high-functioning autistic person. And I had been doing the MDMA sessions with her, typical 125. And she was so far depressed and anxious that we made some progress, but it was very slow, very little. I then I took the 125 MDMA down to 108 and added half a gram of mushrooms. And boom, she became much more in touch with her body. She got up and danced and things and was active. And I just wanted to pass that along. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but it was very productive. I never went back to the standard after that.
I'm surprised that half a gram would have that with a lower dose of MDMA and then just a half a gram of mushrooms, that it would have such an effect. But I mean, everybody is different. And so.
And she was on the spectrum. Her nervous system was a bit different too.
It's all in infancy, right? I mean, we're experimenting on ourselves, and the doors are wide open.
It's just so interesting because like we're sitting here talking about the efficacy of single substances and how our government doesn't view them as valid, and we're sitting here talking about the exceptional results we're getting from combining them. So it's not even that they have an individual purpose. Together they can appear to do incredible things. So I don't know, man. They talked about this, I can't remember where I heard this, but it's just such a trip that like our government has made illegal the very substances that likely led to the development of our consciousness. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and it's
Brian,
just
not to disagree with what you said about ibogaine becoming illegal, but the way I heard it as an urban legend, evidently there was an article in the Rolling Stone written by Hunter S. Thompson where he described Edmund Muskie being stoned on ibogaine, and it was totally fallacious. But the people making, the law said, "Oh, let's include this too." They didn't know anything about it at all. No one, back in probably 70 knew anything about it. I mean, it was just totally off the radar. Anyway, thought I'd add that.
Man, I appreciate that. Yeah, those little tidbits from history, man.
Yeah, but all this is to say, like, we need to not be afraid of these things. We need to allow people to study these things and so that we can know what we're dealing with and we could properly apply them to ourselves. We could be all better for it. From like the first episode of Midnight Gospel is there is no bad substances. It's just your relationship to them that can be bad. So
corollary to that is drugs are for people who can't handle reality. Or realities for people who can't handle drugs. Either way you want to look at it.
Yeah. In my experience, though, I've come out of a trip that I would argue seemed a lot more real than this place here.
Exactly.
But so one of the things that we were going to talk about is like some books that we came across this past year that we found that might have been helpful. There was a question left on the meetup for people to list off some books. So I want to go through that list real quick. Built to Move by Juliet and Kelly Starrett. Trauma by Paul Conti. The Art of Living by Thich Nhat Hanh. And How to Change Your Mind. Right now, I'm back in school, so I put a bookmark in it, but The Happiness Trap is something that I'm going through right now. It's not bad. I'm enjoying it. It's giving me a little bit to think about. Just by no pressure, does anyone in here going through anything or found something this past year as far as literature that they care to share?
I'm grinding through school right now and I'm learning how to do narrative therapy, which is kind of interesting. But one of the real big things they talk about is the idea that we have all like these values that we hold, and that there are things that get in the way of us living out our values in a way that we want to. And I feel like that's a message a lot of vets could probably use, understanding like how to define your values, what you care about, what you want to live for. It's real hard to live a meaningful life if you don't even know what you're living for. So I found just the general field of narrative therapy. If anyone's interested, there's a bunch of YouTube videos called 2 Islands and a Boat. That's pretty good. And there's also a book to accompany it as well. But I found it as a pretty cool tool for like personal problem solving, kind of getting to the bottom of yourself.
And that's what this is about.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone again for joining us today. Great talk. I'm this has me thinking maybe we should have less guests more often. But we'll see. If anyone would like to see more of that, let us know in the comments when we post this onto YouTube. If you're looking to volunteer or be involved with PPS, I'll leave a link for that as well. Don't be afraid to reach out. And I'll also leave a link for the meetup for our next event that we're going to be having. And again, that is going to be Lauren Faringa with Hippie and a Veteran Foundation. And we meet on the third Sunday of every month at 11. So feel free to join us.
I wanted to pop in. I would sort of on the side, I wanted to check out the publication date. But in 22, Rick Strassman came out with a psychedelics handbook, and I read that this year, and it's a good book. Well worth.
Right. And I also am aware that PPS is finalizing stuff for a book club as well. And I think they're thinking about having it quarterly or maybe almost monthly, something like that. But they're
putting together, it's a heck of a book list that I've seen so far in terms of suggestions people have made. So
yeah, I think they're just trying to finalize what would be the best order to put them in as far as like having it not be too dry and having people that haven't gone through some of the more commonly read literature, just to get people on the same page. So keep an eye out for that. But with all that said, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for doing this, you guys.
Thank you.